Welcome to Module 5, Embracing Your Shadow, the Path to Wholeness. One of the most profound paradoxes of human psychology is that our greatest potential for growth and authenticity lies precisely in what we've rejected or denied about ourselves. The parts of our personality that we've pushed into the shadow often hold the very qualities we need for wholeness and genuine self-expression. This hidden dimension of ourselves is what Carl Jung called the shadow, perhaps his most famous and widely recognized concept. Yet, despite its popularity, the shadow is frequently misunderstood, oversimplified, or approached with unnecessary fear. Today, we'll explore what the shadow truly is, how it forms, why it matters so deeply for psychological health, and how it manifests in your everyday life. Understanding your shadow isn't about uncovering something terrible about yourself. It's about reclaiming the fullness of who you are and accessing vital energy that has been locked away. Let's begin by clarifying what Jung meant by the shadow. At its most basic, your shadow contains all the parts of yourself that your conscious mind has rejected, denied, or failed to develop. These aren't just negative qualities, but any aspects of your potential that didn't fit your developing self-concept or weren't supported by your family and culture. Jung distinguished between the personal shadow, those individual qualities you've disowned, and the collective shadow, which contains human potentials rejected by your entire culture or society. Both influence your psychology, though the personal shadow tends to be more immediately accessible. The shadow forms naturally through the process of psychological development. As children, we quickly learn which qualities and behaviors bring approval and which bring disapproval. To maintain connection with caregivers and belong to our social groups, we emphasize certain aspects of ourselves while suppressing others. This process isn't inherently problematic. It's a necessary part of developing a functional identity. Problems arise when this selective development becomes rigid, leaving important aspects of ourselves permanently in the dark. Contrary to popular belief, the shadow isn't simply the dark side or negative aspects of personality. It contains everything that doesn't fit our conscious self-image, which might include positive qualities like creativity, spontaneity, or assertiveness, if these weren't valued in our developmental environment. There's an interesting relationship between the persona, the social mask we discussed in Module 2, and the shadow. Often, they form as complementary pairs. The more rigidly we identify with a particular persona, the more its opposite qualities get pushed into shadow. The always responsible person may have an irresponsible shadow. The perpetually nice person often has an angry shadow. The ultra-logical person might have an emotional, intuitive shadow, and so on. Why do we create shadows in the first place? Shadow formation serves important psychological functions, particularly in early development. As children, our primary needs include safety, belonging, and the maintenance of attachment bonds. We intuitively sense which aspects of ourselves threaten these needs and adapt accordingly. If expressing anger threatened connection with caregivers, that anger might be relegated to shadow. If vulnerability was met with ridicule, that vulnerability goes underground. If independence was discouraged, self-reliance might become shadow material. If Family systems powerfully shape shadow content. In some families, certain emotions are implicitly forbidden. We don't get angry in this house. Big boys don't cry. In other words, particular roles are already filled. Your sister is the artist. Your brother is the smart one, leading to the underdevelopment of those potentials in other family members. Cultural influences similarly direct shadow formation. Qualities valued by the dominant culture tend to remain conscious, while devalued qualities get pushed into the shadow. In achievement-oriented societies, receptivity and rest may become shadow material. In collectivist cultures, certain expressions of individuality might be relegated to the shadow. Gender socialization creates predictable shadow patterns. Traditional masculine socialization often pushes vulnerability, emotional expressiveness, and nurturing qualities into the shadow. Traditional feminine socialization might relegate assertiveness, anger, and certain forms of power into the shadow. Understanding shadow formation as adaptation rather than pathology is crucial. Your shadow developed not because something was wrong with you, but because you were responding intelligently to your environment with the resources available at that time. Shadow work isn't about blaming yourself or others, but about recognizing patterns that may no longer serve you. One of the most important mechanisms of the shadow is projection, the unconscious attribution to others of qualities that actually belong to ourselves. Because we can't or won't recognize certain qualities in ourselves, we perceive them vividly in others while remaining blind to them in our own personality. You can begin to recognize your shadow projections through emotional intensity. When someone triggers a strong, seemingly disproportionate emotional reaction, whether attraction or repulsion, it often signals shadow material at work. You're not just reacting to the person, but to your own disowned qualities that they embody or express. Common projection patterns include being consistently irritated by a particular quality in others. For example, selfish people always bother me. Finding yourself strongly drawn to certain qualities in others that feel foreign to your self-concept. Assuming others have motives or intentions that you would deny in yourself. Repetitive conflicts around the same issues with different people. Black and white judgments about others' behavior. Projections occur in all relationships, but becomes particularly evident in close partnerships, where the intensity of connection tends to activate core psychological material. Many relationship conflicts involve mutual projection, with each partner triggering and reacting to the other's shadow content. Projection also operates collectively. Groups project their shadow material onto other groups, seeing their own disowned qualities in those they consider other. Much of prejudice, discrimination, and intergroup conflict involves this collective shadow projection, making shadow awareness crucial not just for personal growth, but for social healing. Perhaps the most liberating aspect of shadow work is discovering the gold in the shadow, the positive, life-enhancing qualities that have been relegated to darkness alongside more challenging material. This gold might include creativity and spontaneity that didn't fit family or educational expectations, strength and assertiveness that seemed threatening in your particular context, vulnerability and emotional depth that felt unsafe to express, sexuality and sensuality that conflicted with cultural or religious messaging, playfulness and joy that were discouraged in achievement-focused environments. Many people are surprised to discover how much vitality and potential reside in their shadow. Qualities like passion, power, authentic self-expression, and deep joy are frequently found there, having been deemed too wild, inappropriate, or threatening for conscious identity. Artist and writer Henry Miller captured this phenomenon when he wrote, "In this moment, I find more pleasure, more joy, more reality, more that I can use than in all the beautiful, well-adjusted moments which I have experienced in normal situations." He was describing the liberation that comes from reconnecting with shadow material. These shadow gifts often appear first in projection, in the qualities we admire or envy in others. The colleague whose confidence you admire, the friend whose creativity you envy, the public figure whose authenticity you respect. These may all be pointing towards your own shadow gold. Reclaiming these positive shadow aspects doesn't mean becoming someone new, but recovering the fullness of who you already are. It's a process of integration rather than addition, bringing to consciousness what has always been part of your psychological makeup. What are the costs of avoiding or denying your shadow? Perhaps the most immediate is energy depletion. Keeping aspects of yourself in shadow requires constant psychological effort, monitoring and censoring thoughts, feelings, and expressions that might reveal the disowned parts. This vigilance consumes tremendous energy that could otherwise be available for creative living. Relationships suffer when shadow material remains unconscious. Projections distort our perceptions of others, leading to misunderstandings, repeated conflicts, and disconnection. We may be attracted to people who embody our shadow qualities only to later criticize them for the very qualities that initially drew us to them. Authenticity becomes impossible when significant parts of ourselves remain in shadow. We present a partial self to the world and even to ourselves, creating a sense of incompleteness or fraudulence that undermines our well-being. Many people describe the relief of shadow integration as finally becoming myself or no longer having to pretend. Growth and development stall when shadow material remains unaddressed. The disowned parts act like psychological anchors, holding us in familiar but limiting patterns. Many moments of significant personal evolution involve the integration of previously rejected aspects of the self. From a moral perspective, unconscious shadow material poses particular concerns. When we refuse to acknowledge certain qualities in ourselves, we often act them out unconsciously in ways that affect others. The person who cannot acknowledge their anger might express it passively through subtle sabotage. The individual who denies their need for attention might manipulate situations to receive it indirectly. As Jung famously stated, people will do in the dark what they would never do in the light. Shadow awareness creates the possibility of conscious choice rather than unconscious acting out. Shadow work isn't a one-time event, but an ongoing journey of self-discovery and integration. This process tends to unfold in spirals rather than linear progression, with new layers of shadow material becoming accessible as earlier layers are integrated. Different approaches serve this journey, from dream analysis and active imagination to relationship feedback and creative expression. We'll explore specific methods in our next video, but the common thread is developing a relationship with shadow material, rather than either identifying with it completely or continuing to reject it. It's important to recognize that shadow integration aims for wholeness, not perfection. The goal isn't to eliminate all challenging aspects of yourself, but to bring them into conscious relationship with your total personality. This integration paradoxically allows for more choice and flexibility. When we acknowledge our capacity for anger, for instance, we're less likely to be controlled by it unconsciously. Shadow work requires courage, the willingness to look at aspects of yourself that may feel threatening, shameful, or contrary to your self-image. Yet this courage is richly rewarded with increased energy, authenticity, and psychological freedom. The shadow, properly understood, is not an enemy to be conquered, but a doorway to greater psychological freedom and authenticity. By reclaiming the parts of yourself that have been relegated to darkness, you gain access to vital energy, creativity, and wholeness that transcend the limitations of a partial identity. In our next video, we'll explore practical approaches to shadow integration, specific methods for recognizing, engaging with, and ultimately incorporating shadow material into a more complete sense of self. We'll look at techniques ranging from dream work and active imagination to relationship dynamics and creative expression. For now, I invite you to reflect. What qualities do you find most difficult to acknowledge in yourself? What traits consistently trigger strong emotions when you encounter them in others? What positive qualities do you admire in others that feel foreign to your own self-concept? As you consider these questions, remember that shadow work isn't about self-criticism, but about self-discovery. Approach your shadow not with judgment, but with curiosity, compassion, and a willingness to reclaim the fullness of who you are. As Jung himself once wrote, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Okay, bye for now. See you in the next video.